This is week 4 of the fall trimester. I have one more week to finish up this painting, so I'm already feeling the time crunch. Big things that I'm worrying about this week is focusing on transitions, unifying forms. Mostly it's transitions though, like transitioning from the darks into the lights. And one thing that they really drill in at Ravenswood is painting like your lights into your darks and your darks into your lights. And you're pushing the lights past where they actually go and then pushing the darks past where they actually go. And so not like, for example, not painting lights right up to the shadow line and then the shadow line just right up to the shadow line, but you push it farther on each side so you create a paint layer that's flat. Because if you were to paint it right up to each other, it would start making valleys in the paint surface. It's harder to do that, and you can kind of lose the structure and really solid shapes if you're not paying attention to that while you're painting this way, because you can get really interesting brush strokes that way, and it keeps you from kind of being overly cautious and kind of like tickling your painting, and it helps you to be more confident to be putting down big brush strokes, because it's kind of going back and forth between finding the drawing and then destroying it and then finding it again, hoping that each time you're doing that, your piece is getting better and better and stronger. Though with that, one thing that I was struggling with in this painting, so what I was doing is I was taking my lights, painting the lights into the darks and then the darks into the lights, but the problem that I was having is that the shadows and dark halftones then were getting chalky, and so when things are starting to look chalky, that's usually because there's too much white in your dark areas. So Matt told me that I should really be doing the reverse of that. So I should first paint the darks out into the lights, and the dark should be going out farther than the shadow or the dark halftone actually is, and then you paint the lights over on top of that. So the first layer should be the darks outward, and then you push the lights back on top there. I was doing the opposite, which is getting that chalky look, but doing it that way keeps things more vibrant and clean in your dark areas. Another thing this week that I think really improved my painting a whole lot was working on the shadow shapes and then the background together again as a whole. So working on the background and the shadow, especially in this painting where the background is really dark, it's darker than the shadows in most parts. You're really thinking about painting atmosphere and air. It's like the old saying, light is form and shadow is atmosphere. So you want the dark shadowy areas to be really atmospheric and be all unified, and then you want the lights to really be solid and have the form and the really good structure all the way through it. So I spent one day, which I probably could spend a whole week doing it, but you kind of don't have time on a 5-week painting, but I spent the whole time repainted the whole shadow shape and the background, and I painted them together, making sure that they were unified and really losing parts of the shadow, that the shadow line is really diffused into the background, and then in some areas too you can see the shadow line compared to the background, but then losing it in other areas where it is lost. And so when I'm doing this, I'm really thinking about the air that's around the figure, and also probably most importantly too, the air that's in between the figure and myself. And when you're thinking that way, you're really thinking about the whole atmosphere in the space, and then also making sure that the figure is affecting the space around her. So in some areas the background is lighter because the light that's hitting her body is going to be bouncing off and hitting the water that's in the air, which kind of makes a glow around her in some areas. So I think that really improved my painting, getting space and air in the background. I don't know if you can see it so well with the pictures on my cell phone, because I think my cell phone kind of compresses those values, so it's harder to see. But hopefully when I'm finished with this painting, I can get a nice shot so you can see the air that's all around the figure. And what I mentioned in my last video about painting technique, which I kind of, I guess, touched on now with painting lights into darks and darks into lights, which is really just a more direct way of painting where you're putting down brush strokes and leaving them and painting more thickly and opaquely. Something that I've been really trying to do, and I think I've been more successful with this painting doing that technique than in any of my other figure paintings. I think my other figure paintings, I painted it more thinly because I couldn't handle the paint well enough, but doing the more direct way of painting is really challenging, and at least as far as what I'm concerned, it's kind of the hardest technique that I've tried so far, which I really want to do that now, especially while I'm in school and have teachers watching over me and can really give me tips and pointers with it. But it is really challenging, and I have one more week to finish up this painting, and I'm kind of concerned that I'm not going to get the resolve that I want to on it, because especially with this painting technique that's challenging, it feels like juggling and there's a lot of balls in the air. like painting technique, worrying about temperature, color, value, edges, atmosphere. It's just a lot to think about. And so if I focus on one thing, like how I'm handling the paint, it's like I focus on that, but then I drop a ball. But I'm just finding this painting really challenging, but I want to keep practicing. That's all you can do really, I guess, is keep practicing. And here's the palette that I've been working with. So I'm in a limited color palette, meaning that the 4 colors that I have is black, white, cadmium red, light, and yellow ochre. And then in the middle of the palette is all of my mixtures. So I have a value scale going down with a row of greens, oranges, reds, and purples. And that's been pretty good so far with painting her skin tones. And so this is the palette that I've consistently been mixing up, but I do wait until the model gets up each day and I remix everything and I see how the light's coming down. And so kind of depending on what the light is, if it's a more of a gray day or more of a colorful day, then my colors will on that palette will look the same, but they'll either be grayer or more vibrant. And for my cast has been so much fun to work on. I'm really enjoying working on this cast. I'm still working on the transfer drawing, and like always, I start off with really simple shapes. So looking at this, I first divided it into 2 groups because there's 3 angels or cherubs that are kind of closer together, and then there's one off to the side. So I first simplified it into there. Looking at negative shapes is helping me break this up. And then when I'm kind of confident in the really simplified version, then I start breaking it up into the more complex shadow shapes that you see. And in the last day that I was working on this on Friday, Magda said to just make it look more naturalistic so I can easier see my mistakes or what I've got right so I can keep pushing it along. So making it more naturalistic really meant unifying the shadow shape, working on the edge line, so some edges will be sharper, more diffused where they are. And then also forms kind of, well, for example, the tops of the angels' head, I think on every one of them, the top of their head is light, and you can see where the head ends and where the back of the relief is. But the head's a light shape, and then the back of the relief is a light shape too. So instead of having a hard dark line showing the outline of the head, you really don't see that in nature. So I lighten that up so you are really just focused on the shadow shape and the whole light shape of the whole piece. And then Magda also suggested that I play around with the white chalk a little bit and practice how I'm going to be getting space into this relief. So on this transfer drawing, I'm going to be working with 3 value stencil. I have white chalk, which is 1, the gray of the paper, and then the charcoal for the shadow shape.